Welcome, everybody, to another episode of From Us to You, US Gamer's flagship podcast. I'm your host, Kat Bailey, and today joining me is our news writer, Mike Williams.
Hello, hello.
And also joining us is our other news writer, Nadia Oxford.
Hello, hello.
No Bob Mackey today. He is out, which is too bad because he reviewed Mirror's Edge Cataclysm, which hasn't been getting super good reviews. So I would have liked to have heard his perspective. But we got a whole bunch of stuff that we're going to be covering this week, including E3 announcements, the WarCraft movie, and what the heck is Natsume doing now that Stardew Valley has completely destroyed Harvest Moon. But we'll be getting to that in a minute. Please forgive us because E3 is coming up fast and we're all a little frazzled. I'm not looking forward to it, but we do what we have to do.
I'm kind of looking forward to it.
All right, we'll go with our first topic. Mike Williams, you want to talk a little bit about the torrent of E3 announcements that have been coming out this week. So what exactly has stood out to you the most?
I mean, today we've had Watch Dogs 2, Injustice 2, and more gameplay and previews and hands-on stuff for Deus Ex Mankind Divided. And, I mean, they're all, some of them were expected, like Watch Dogs 2 has been rumored for a while. Jason Schreier reported on it like 2 months ago, a month ago. And the only thing he really got wrong was the setting of the game. It's not San Francisco, it's actually Chicago. So I think it's kind of interesting that we're starting to get not the changing face of E3 is that not only are companies like EA moving outside of the show floor, but we're also starting to see a lot more announcements before E3, especially of stuff that we would have kind of expected already. Like sequels are very much like anywhere from like a month out from E3's start, everyone started like, oh, hey, let's get our sequel out there. Let's get it some face time before E3 comes and we're all in the deluge of everything else.
I think that's not a bad strategy, to be perfectly honest, because it kind of gets the buzz going, I suppose. Like, so you put out the announcement, say, for Injustice 2. I think if they had shown that at Sony's press conference, the announcement, like, there would have been a blurb, and what people would have been like, oh, cool, but it might have been lost in the mix, especially a game like Injustice 2. But instead, people are like, now this gives people room to talk about it, and then you can actually show something at E3.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably also why Nintendo hasn't revealed very much about Zelda yet. They don't really have to because it's going to be such a big event. Everyone's going to be talking about it anyway.
Yeah, they're saving it all for the big Treehouse stream, which is going to be going pretty much throughout E3, I think. As usual, Nintendo is kind of doing their own thing.
Their own thing.
They tend to do that.
Yeah, it used to be that the E3 reveal was the, oh, hey, this thing exists. And now the E3 reveal is, oh, hey, we told you about this thing that exists. Here's what it plays like now.
Yeah.
Injustice was a gameplay-free trailer. Watch Dogs was gameplay-free, although they did show the game briefly for a while on their stream. Battlefield 1 is also a trailer that was completely CG. So it seems like a lot of this is, hey, this is our game is coming. Here's maybe some of the features.
So Battlefield 1's trailer was 100% CG. There was literally no in-engine stuff?
I mean, it might have been like in-engine, but it wasn't gameplay. I mean, it looked CG to me, but but you never know these days. So it's like, what's the other one? Infinite Warfare was definitely in-engine, but it wasn't like really gameplay. It was like cutscenes-ish. But actual like, hey, here's the game being played. That's the stuff that looks like is being saved for E3 now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
which is good. It kind of I think it kind of marks a maturation of E3 itself, which of course is kind of, I don't want to say downgrading, but it is kind of diffusing in a way.
It is.
Because when you think about it, like, it's a lot less meme-worthy, I guess. I mean, everyone remembers the iconic scene of the guys like cheering on the Zelda trailer reveal. So we're not going to get so much of that anymore, but it also means we're going to get less of the sitting in our chairs for 10 minutes and watching a trailer and then seeing nothing to reveal the gameplay. So we get excited for a minute, then we're like, oh, now what? Yeah. So I'm okay with this new direction.
Yeah, no, and E3 has sort of gone down. It's undeniable, and it's because there's so many other places to show your game.
Yeah.
You can do it on Twitch. You can do it online. Nintendo has been doing it with directs quite successfully. Places have cons. There's 4 different PAXs at this point. Gamescom, EGX. So if you want to show your game now, it's pretty easy. And E3 is now just one of the pack, not the event.
I would actually disagree with that. I think it's the only event in which you can get a global audience. The global press all shows up for E3 in a way that they simply don't show up for Gamescom. Or, I don't mean to like slag on our own event. EGX is basically PAX with a dash of Gamescom, and it's a really successful event for the UK. But E3 has a global reach that none of these really do. I mean, I was just hanging out with somebody who works for GameSpot Australia, and they all come up here for E3. And not only that, but E3 has a reach into the traditional mainstream press that those events simply don't. The mainstream press doesn't care about PAX. The mainstream press won't report on a company-specific event. They will report on E3. This is where the spotlight falls on the industry in general. And not surprisingly, publishers are wheeling out the biggest games. I think that I would be a lot more worried when EA stops going to E3 entirely, because EA is still having a press conference. It's just that they're not going to have a booth on the show floor. They're doing their own tangential event. And I got to say, thank God, because their booths were always horrible. And this way, this is like a venue set up specifically for EA. And it allows me it gives me a much easier chance to be able to get substantial amounts of hands-on time with their games. So I think this is actually an improvement without necessarily losing, kind of their influence on the event. They'll still be there. They're just holding a separate event offsite than piggybacking on E3's hype.
Yeah, I think the show will be smaller, but the time period will still be very useful because, yes, as you said, all of us are coming in regardless for E3 to cover the show regardless. So why not at least have your event adjacent to it, near it, at least at the same time. I do think E3 is still sort of coming to grips with the change in coverage away from traditional and online press to Twitch streamers, YouTubers, and the like. It's still like a lot of those people can't get badges normally for E3.
It's just funny because E3 YouTubers and streamers have pretty much taken over like press events otherwise.
Yeah, and so last year they added the partner thing where they gave different publishers like X number of badges that you can give to your. It was the prosumer was the term they used, and that was what like EA knows. Hey, these are our good YouTube streamers that will have a long reach for our game. These are the people that we need to invite. Let's give them a badge. And I think E3 will need to start changing to sort of pull in more of those people.
I think E3, I agree with you on that front. As for what E3 shows, I think that E3, they're going to show their flagship games, and that's what the event is for. And I don't think those flagship games are going away anytime soon, because at the end of the day, plenty of games do extremely well on digital distribution. Overwatch certainly shows that. But at the end of the year, like, the games that we'll be talking about are those big mainstream games that get like lots of attention, and they are going to get all the spotlight at E3. So before we move on, I'm just really curious, really quickly, what is the single announcement that has you most excited? I'm going to say Final Fantasy XII HD Remaster.
Zelda.
I mean, we already knew about Zelda. Come on.
Yeah, you're right. Oh, shoot. You put me on the spot. Mike, you go first.
Man. I'm going to say probably at the top is going to be Persona actually having a release date.
That's a good one.
The thing that won't be shown at E3.
I'm going to say I'll go with Watch Dogs 2. I'm the open world guy. And I always like to see what they can improve. Watch Dogs was a solid base that could have been much better. So I'd like to see what they can do to make it a better game.
Nadia?
I'm going to go with Dragon Quest Builders. I really wish I was there to play it. I like Minecraft. I like Dragon Quest. It's just, it'll work for me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Moving on to my topic. A couple days ago, I went to LA for the red carpet premiere, the global premiere of a game that's already been out in Europe for a week now. WarCraft, the newest video game movie and Blizzard's first foray into the video game movie sphere. I got to see it at the Chinese theater and everything. It was fun.
Really?
Yep. They actually had it at the Chinese theater. Lots of cosplay on the black carpet. It wasn't a red carpet. It was actually a black carpet because, of course.
I love it.
Yeah, they couldn't have the red carpet because that would be stunning for the Horde.
And the house was packed full of press and Blizzard. And the Blizzard employees were all like going nuts at everything. So that was a thing as well. So as we know, WarCraft not been getting such great reviews on various channels. I think I was a little kinder to it in my own review, which you can go read on the site. And I think that's, as I was watching that movie, I realized what a nerd I am for WarCraft in general. I love WarCraft. I used to pore over the instruction manuals and like the lore stuff, like when I was a teenager. Like I knew it really well. So I kind of went in with a certain degree of familiarity with the world. Mm-hmm. And it occurred to me that Blizzard was very much catering to me. Like the imagery of like the Dark Portal, the imagery of like familiar characters like Gul'dan, a Murloc popping up here, a polymorph spell happening there. Lots of, and not only that, but like the look of the film was really evocative of the Blizzard world in general, to its benefit and its detriment. Its benefit in that, well, it certainly looks like a Blizzard like thing. To its detriment in that it looked, I think it really clashed with the live action.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. I
think they should have just made it all CG.
Yeah, and from what I've seen online, it sounds like a film that was let down by its script. A lot of people were complaining that while starting with the orcs and humans is probably a good base for WarCraft, people thought that they should have more personal stories, maybe like Arthas's fall.
Now, who is Arthas? Nobody knows who the heck Arthas is. So his rise and fall in one movie, like you would have to be emotionally invested in the character.
Yeah.
And I almost feel like if you introduced, here's the thing, like Arthas shows up in Warcraft 3, right?
Yep.
He's human in the human campaign. And I think you get a really good sense of him because initially he starts out kind of heroic, if brash, kind of like Anakin Skywalker, I guess. And then as the campaign progresses, like he falls and he falls and he falls. And this carries over well because the human campaign takes place over the course of like several hours. and you get a good feel for the characters, and like you kind of become emotionally invested in them. So it hits particularly hard when Arthas goes bad at the end of the first. I don't know if you can pull that off as easily in a game. And not only that, like any game that's based on Arthas's fall is also going to have stuff like, the rise of the undead. And you're going to have like the whole night elf stuff. And it's going to be like so like clustered together and packed in that it's going to be, and the Burning Legion like coming in and invading as well. It's going to, and I think that's what gets to the core of the problem with these games is that having such a massive lore and having so many factions and so many characters works well for like WarCraft or World of Warcraft, but I'm not sure it works as well for a movie because there's one thing that I would say about this movie is like, you had your orc characters, you had your human characters, you had like 3 concurrent storylines going on at one time that kind of depended on your familiarity with the characters and their particular arcs. And I think that it felt really confused and overstuffed. And I think that if you weren't already invested in the WarCraft lore, like, which I'll be perfectly honest, I am, well, you're going to hate it.
Yeah. I also heard that the orcs were actually the more sympathetic.
For sure.
Apparently, the human side is pretty much just names and ciphers and just like
really generic.
Hey, you're just like, oh, there's a guy and another guy and another guy, and then on the orc side, it's like, oh, here's some humanity and camaraderie and.
Yeah. One thing I heard coming in as an outsider for Warcraft is even fans are saying it was a busy movie, and they really should have
multiple climaxes, multiple trials of combat for honor, and the big charge that looked a little too CG for its own good. But yeah, no, definitely the humans were a lot more generic than the orcs. You had your king and your knight and your bookish mage. The only human that was particularly interesting was Medivh, who's the crazy mage.
I was about to say he was going to go crazy.
Yeah, he's an eccentric mage guy. And he's fun. I thought that Ben Foster pulled off Medivh pretty well. As for the orc side, like, they're the ones who actually have those moments of camaraderie. Like, one moment that stood out to me was when Duratan and Orgrim are sitting on a ledge looking over the orc encampment talking about what to do about Gul'dan. And, like, Duratan just picks up a pebble and throws it at Orgrim. And they just kind of, like, chuckle or whatever. And, like, it felt like a real moment, right? Like, the orcs get all the real moments. And it helps that the orcs look really good. The orcs get all the best lines. They get the most interesting characterization. They have the best villain, because there are multiple villains in this film. And so the orcs are always the most interesting thing on screen. Like, but when I think probably the biggest problem at the end of the day is, aside from being overstuffed and confusing for people who aren't familiar with the Warcraft lore, it doesn't resolve in a satisfactory fashion because it follows the original game, which is fine. The original game, like, you had an orc campaign and a human campaign, and either one, like, had a different ending, and the orc ending actually becomes canonical because it leads into Warcraft 2. And that's fine, but it resulted in a lot of stuff not really being resolved from that movie. And you kind of go, okay, so there's not a really good payoff for this. And it actually makes me think Warcraft 2 might be a lot better. Like, it might actually translate a lot better to screen, because that one has a much more definitive ending.
How far does this go? Is this like, are we talking next movie Thrall or next movie...
The next movie would definitely be Warcraft 2.
Okay.
Which, if you've played it, that's where the humans team up with the elves and the orcs team up with the trolls and the ogres. And they have a big old fight. And the Thrall story happens concurrently with Warcraft 2, which, if you've heard of the Thrall story, basically Orc Jesus is raised by a human and becomes a war chief. And you see Thrall in the movie, but he's a baby, so
He's technically Orc Moses.
Orc Moses.
Much
My
like
apologies.
Superman.
Yes.
Yeah. So
So there will be a sequel. I'm telling you this right now.
And I'm going to say, like a lot of people, I don't think this movie is probably going to do well in the U.S.
But it's doing hella well in China.
Yeah,
Is it
it's
really?
already made 121 million.
It's breaking records in China.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's going to be carried through, and Legendary is owned currently by a Chinese company, so it's going to move forward regardless.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to ask you about that, whether or not, like, if it did, flop at the box office, if that would have an impact on a sequel. But it looks like it's probably going to happen.
And to be honest, I think that with there being so many World of Warcraft players out there, or people who are at least familiar with the Warcraft universe, like, that's a built-in audience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have to imagine that a lot of them are going to go just out of sheer curiosity. Because even though it'll get bad reviews, like, they do have an emotional investment in it, right?
Yeah, of course.
I mean, God knows I've been playing Warcraft for 20 years at this point. Even if I hadn't gone to the movie for the premiere, I probably would have gone just, whatever. I'll go check it out, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but it also seems
I'll
very much
Redbox
an airplane movie.
Yeah, I'll Redbox it or see it on an international flight or something.
Yeah, exactly. But so I don't think it was quite the triumph that Blizzard was envisioning.
Mm-hmm.
But I was right about one thing. They did have some pretty tight control over the film, and it's actually fairly faithful to the source material. So good on them for that, I suppose.
Yeah,
But
I'll be interested in seeing how the same with Ubisoft and Assassin's Creed works out.
yeah, I just don't think that you can make a good video game movie.
Yeah, it's kind of looking that way, isn't it? I'm almost wondering if we're going to have to get to this point where here is your game movie for you fans. Everyone else need not apply, because from an outsider's perspective, even though I don't know a lot about Warcraft, I know enough. But if I were just a regular person watching the TV, and I'd be like, oh, here's a story about orcs and humans. I saw Lord of the Rings already. What is this? Why do I care? So I can see Blizzard may as well put all their energy into making something for the fans.
Absolutely.
I'm sure it still needed, tuning up, even with the fans. Like, as I said, like it lacked focus, so I've heard. But if they just kind of work on that sort of problem, I think you could have an interesting separation of genres here. You may as well at this point. We've tried and we've tried and we've tried.
I think a good video game movie can be like supplementary to the main game.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, I think you can probably do a good video game movie if you do probably one of the more cinematic games. Like, I think Uncharted would probably translate over pretty straight to film if they wanted to.
I think that probably the problem with a lot of video game movies is that once stripped away of like their core strengths, which is often their gameplay, they just don't hold up that well. I mean, you look at Warcraft, right? Like, so much of what is a big strength for Blizzard in the game sphere just doesn't work as well on screen, particularly the look of the movie. And I mean, stuff that, was like really cool to read in an instruction manual 20 years ago feels like, Fantasy 101 on screen.
Exactly.
It starts to feel
Especially
like
nowadays.
cliche because, I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but a lot of like game developers crib directly from movies that have already happened. And I guess like stories tend to get held to a different standard on screen. And what would be passable in a game sense, it just isn't
Absolutely
in the movie theater. So
yeah.
for our third and final segment, Nadia's going to be talking a little bit about Natsume and their E3 offerings, and where the heck does Harvest Moon stand in light of Stardew Valley?
It's kind of a weird question, isn't it? Like, I wrote up Natsume's showings, or what's going to be on display the other day, and they're going to have the new River City game, which is fine. They're going to have the new Wild Guns game, which is fine. But then they're like, oh, we're also going to have Harvest Moon Skytree Village, which is the name of the new Harvest Moon game for the Nintendo 3DS. And it's like, we're in an interesting situation here because whereas we do have a lot of indie developers picking up the slack where other companies have just kind of deposited their properties, Harvest Moon is still a thing, and it's still a thing that Natsume takes very seriously because there are a lot of games out there. Plus, we have Rune Factory, and we all know the kerfuffle between the... Well, I don't even fully understand it myself now that I think about it. But Stardew Valley, barring a few things here and there that are probably going to be fixed in future updates, that's as good as a Harvest Sim game gets, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, the problem with Stardew Valley right now is that it's a Steam exclusive. I haven't seen any word of it coming out on PS4 or Vita or whatever.
It is actually being... he is going to do a console port. He actually is...
but, I mean, he's one guy.
Well, he's signed up with a publisher, Concerned Fish, or Chucklefish, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
His name is Concerned Ape, I got it mixed up. But he's with Chucklefish, who's doing, they're doing localizations in other languages for him. They're handling the console ports. So he is doing all the content while this publisher takes care of the technicalities for him. So we're going to have Stardew Valley for quite a while in the future.
The thing that hits me is at any point did they, while obviously they've been working on this game, did Stardew Valley come out and they looked and they were like, wow, that is really close to the subtitle of our next Harvest Moon game. What do we do now that these people seem to really like that? Because as soon as they announced it and I saw the title, I was like, that is really, really close to Stardew Valley. Really close.
Skytree Village, Stardew Valley.
Yeah.
I guess Stardew Valley, Skytree Village, it is going to offer some things that Stardew Valley can't, topography. You can manipulate the topography apparently, which I think is kind of cool. But I have not really been into a Harvest Moon game since Mineral Town, Friends of Mineral Town, and neither has Concerned Ape, the guy who did Stardew Valley, which is why he did Stardew Valley in the first place. So is this going to be different? Has Natsume learned something at all from Stardew Valley, even though, as you said, the game has probably been in production for a long time, but it's not too late, you know what I mean?
What could they learn from Stardew Valley exactly?
One thing I find the thing about Stardew Valley that really attracts me, and I wrote about this for US Gamer, was the relationships between you and the other townspeople. Harvest Moon tends to be a little bit sugary, whereas Stardew Valley, I won't say it's scandalous or anything like that, but it does have some very human traits to its characters. So I think that's one thing that Natsume could probably focus on. But although Harvest Moon 64 did kind of bring up issues yes, Kitty, issues like divorce and stuff like that. Like your wife or I guess you could only play as your spouse basically could leave you if you weren't paying attention to them, which is kind of sad. But divorce is funny.
Yeah, no, and I personally had never played any Harvest Moon games.
Cat has played Harvest Moon.
But Stardew Valley, I was like, okay, everyone is really excited about this. I have a chance to play it. I played it, got sucked in for a while, and then it was one of those things that I had to put down and stop. Mm-hmm. So I think Kat is right. The fact that there currently isn't a console port, and also there probably will never be a boxed retail release.
That's true.
Kind of helps them.
It does.
A bit.
Plus, this is on the 3DS.
But I mean, it's a 3DS release, so it's not like it's aiming for PlayStation 4, Xbox One consumers, anyways. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of an interesting. It's an interesting time, as you said, that this indie is going up, and in many ways, according to the fans, he did it right when the company has been astray.
We've talked about this in the past, but I'm just interested. I just find it interesting. I'm like, what about Stardew Valley grabbed people that Harvest Moon simply hasn't. All I can think is that, like, Stardew Valley is actually kind of more accessible and I think better made. And, like, has a better interface and, like, just feels bigger, I suppose. And has that really charming graphical style rather than the chunky 2.5D style. Stuff like that.
Yeah, one thing I do like about Stardew Valley versus Harvest Moon is that Stardew Valley, it kind of combines all the boring tasks, let's be honest, into one action. Like, you milk your cow loves you. That's the end of it. You got your milk. Whereas Harvest Moon, you got to take out the brush, you got to brush them, you have to talk to them, you have to milk them. It gets repetitive. And, you know, even Stardew Valley gets repetitive after a while, but once you're done with your chores, you really have a lot of extra time to just talk to those characters that you're invested in and go mining and go fishing.
Go dungeon hunting, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a surprisingly deep game. It's one of those, like, you're like, oh, this is very simple. Oh, no. Oh, no,
exactly.
There's another system. Why?
Yeah. I actually am a big fan of the fishing. A lot of people have complained about how it's too hard, but I really, it kind of gives you a feedback, as it were. Like, there's a weight to it. Harvest Moon is more like, oh, fish. You know, it's more of a, there's no it's not much of an interaction going on.
I wasn't able to find a reason to spend a lot of my time fishing. I suppose that there were, like, certain fish that you could catch at certain times of day that would be good, but the energy expended to get a fish never seemed to be worth it, so I didn't fish too much in Stardew Valley.
I like fishing in games. I'm one of those losers who played Zelda and likes fishing. So.
Oh my god, in Twilight Princess, that's all I did. Fish. I think I got everything that you could possibly do when you're fishing in that game.
I know. I did.
Fishing in that game was great.
Yeah, especially Ocarina of Time. You had the Rumble Pack, and that was a really new sensation. That was really cool. But you kind of had the same thing going on with Stardew Valley. What's funny is I came into Stardew Valley after coming off Breath of Fire 3 for the 50th time, and the fishing systems are very similar. So I was like, oh, okay, I can dig this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Natsume is experiencing is just the increased competition, I suppose. And competition is a good thing, right? I mean,
it really is.
As a Madden fan, like, you hear people comment all the time, if only Madden had competition. Like, EA killed the competition and now Madden stinks. And I think that's a little harsh, but there is a grain of truth to the notion that Madden hasn't had competition, so it hasn't been pushed as hard. And so hopefully this is a case of Natsume going, oh, okay, so our product, our game is still very relevant.
Yeah, and I really hope that's what happens, because let's face it, Harvest Moon is such a weird idea. When I first saw it on Super Nintendo, we're like, what the heck is this? Who's going to play a game about farming, which was a very late release for the SNES to begin with. And then we have this very dedicated fandom surrounding it. I would really hate to see that fandom stagnate and die because of, like, poor, shoddy releases. So I'm really glad we have Rune Factory, we have Harvest Moon, now we have Stardew Valley. And I do want to see Natsume give us something worth playing again. If it's good, I'll buy it, I'll play it.
Yeah, me too. But it's been a long time. Maybe the last good Harvest Moon game was Friends of Mineral Town.
Yeah, that's my vote, frankly.
13 years old at this point.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean, they just haven't been able to hit the mark with, like, anything. And they've had a lot of games. Like, I mean, frankly, Harvest Moon should have just killed it on the DS. And
it really should have.
It should have, but the touchscreen controls were always kind of shoddy, and it got progressively uglier. Their mobile ports never really hit the mark. Like, there's so much opportunity, and Natsume just really hasn't been taking advantage. So, like, now this is their opportunity to be spurred on, so I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'm rooting for him.
Hopefully it works out for you Harvest Moon fans. Hopefully.
I feel you.
All right, so that has been the latest episode of From Us to You. Go and check us out and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, US GamerNet, and of course go also and subscribe and rate us on iTunes. You can hear us an audio version of this podcast on SoundCloud, Stitcher, and other places that you would find a podcast. But in Next week, we're going to be at E3, and we are going to be doing From Us to You live streams starting on Monday morning at 8 a.m. PST and continuing throughout the week and talking about all of the E3 things. So you'll be able to find us over on Twitch and the archive streams over on YouTube. So we're really looking forward to that in a way because, oh my god, E3 is coming and we are all going to die. But in the meantime, I've been Kat Bailey, and for Mike and Nadia, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again.
See ya.